Welcome to the Book Nook podcast. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into Rebecca Yarros's Onyx Storm, the third book in the Empyrean series.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, and we've had a ton of early reactions to this book, some really fascinating reviews and discussions that we want to dig into with you today.
Absolutely. And I think it's amazing we're seeing such strong opinions already, even though it's so early in the book's release.
Right, and if you want to get a copy of the book, we do have a link in the description below. But yeah, I think today we really want to get to the bottom of what's making this book tick and what you can kind of anticipate going into it.
Yeah, I think that's key because there's already so much buzz around this one. It's good to have a guide.
Totally.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think is really interesting is this idea that's already circulating that Onyx Storm might be a filler book.
Ah, yeah, I've seen that floating around.
And, we had one YouTube reviewer, Lexi Jansen. She really pushed back against that. She actually made the argument that it's the best one in the series so far.
Wow. Okay, strong statement.
Yeah, she really loved the world building and all the answers that we're finally getting to some of the long-standing theories that have been around since Fourth Wing.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that does make you wonder, like, if it's really a filler book, if it's answering that many questions.
Exactly. Like, what does that actually mean for the structure of a series like this?
Yeah, and I think the world-building aspect is really interesting there because it suggests that Yarros is really using this book to flesh out the world and give those rewards to the readers who have been paying attention all along.
Yeah, for sure. And, like world building like that, it often means there's even bigger things coming down the line,
Oh, absolutely. It's like laying the groundwork for even bigger conflicts and resolutions later on.
So if you're the kind of reader who really loves that intricate lore that unfolds gradually, this might be a really satisfying read for you.
Totally. Yeah, it's all about those details.
Now, on the other hand, we had another reviewer, Sierra Richard, also on YouTube, and she had a little bit of a different initial experience.
Okay, interesting. So
She mentioned feeling a little overwhelmed at first by all the characters, like keeping track of everybody, both the humans and the dragons.
oh, yeah, there are a lot of characters in this series.
Yeah, and even with the character guide in the front of the book, she said she was like constantly Googling to remember who was related to who.
I can see that. I mean, it's definitely a dense world with a lot of interconnected relationships.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to just how much Yarros is expanding the scope of the narrative in this one. Like, she's introducing all these new players and storylines and perspectives.
Right. And I think that can be a really good thing for a series like this because it adds that richness and complexity.
Right.
But it also means you have to be paying attention.
Yeah, you can't just kind of passively read this one. You got to be in it.
Exactly. I think Sierra even said something to that effect.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Even with that initial feeling of being overwhelmed, she still ended up reading late into the night, like completely engrossed.
Oh, wow. So it clearly hooked her in.
Right, so it seems like even though there's that learning curve with all the new characters, the story itself is strong enough to just pull you in.
Yeah, it sounds like those new characters must bring some really interesting plot threads and dynamics.
Yeah, it makes you want to get to know them.
For sure, for sure.
And speaking of being engrossed, Lexi actually mentioned reading like half the book in the last 3 days.
Yeah.
She was just like losing track of time, completely absorbed.
Wow, that's impressive. I mean, that really speaks to the pacing of the book.
Right, and she gave it 5 stars specifically because she felt like it kept her attention so well, and the action was really exciting.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, that's a good sign if you're looking for a book that's really going to hold you captive.
Yeah, like those books that you just can't put down.
Exactly, exactly.
And Sierra echoed that she described the pace as medium to fast overall, but she did say that certain sections could feel slower if you weren't as invested in that particular plot line or world-building element.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, every book has its peaks and valleys in terms of pacing.
But she also emphasized that even those quote-unquote slower sections were actually crucial for the bigger picture, like for the development of the world and the overall story.
Yeah, like they weren't just filler, they were actually serving a purpose.
Exactly.
Which I think is important.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think, because both reviewers brought up that extensive world building.
Yeah, it seems to be a hallmark of this book.
And Sierra specifically mentioned loving the differences between the continent and the Isles, like seeing how their cultures and people were so distinct.
Ah, that's cool. Yeah. I always love when a fantasy series really fleshes out the different regions of its world.
Right. It makes it feel so much more real and lived in.
Totally. And it makes you wonder how those differences are going to come into play in the bigger conflicts,
Ooh, for sure. For sure. Like, are they going to lead to alliances or wars or what.
Exactly. It's all about that potential.
Yeah, and Sierra actually brought up a really good point. She said that the book is really dense, like physically dense, with small font and a lot of detail. So it ends up being a longer read.
Oh, that's good to know. I mean, for people who are maybe intimidated by big books or who have limited reading time, that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and she even recommended maybe doing a reread or having a character guide handy, especially if it's been a while since you read the previous books.
Yeah, that's always good advice for a series with this much lore and so many characters.
Now let's talk characters, because I think this is where things get really exciting.
Yeah, character development is so crucial in fantasy.
And Sierra had some amazing things to say about the secondary characters.
Ooh, I love when the secondary characters are fleshed out.
She actually compared them to the side characters in Harry Potter, which is like, high praise.
Yeah, that's a big deal in the fantasy world.
Right. And she said she just loved getting to know their individual personalities and their powers and how they all fit together.
Yeah, I mean, when secondary characters are well developed, it just makes the whole world feel so much more real and lived in.
Totally. And it gives you so many more storylines to be invested in. It's not just about the main character anymore.
Exactly. And it creates that richer emotional landscape for the reader.
And Sierra also mentioned the relationship between Violet and Esden, the main characters. She felt like it really started to develop in this book, which is something that maybe wasn't as strong in Iron Flame.
Ah, interesting. So there's some good romance development happening.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And Lexi also talked about Rebecca Yarros' strength in character development, specifically mentioning Violet's growth throughout the series.
Yeah, I mean, it's impressive how both reviewers kind of converged on that point, despite having different initial reactions to the book.
Right. It really seems like Yarros has a knack for creating characters that resonate with readers.
For sure, and that you really want to root for.
Okay, so now the big question, the ending.
Everyone wants to know about the ending.
Lexi described it as having a lot happening towards the end and maybe feeling a little rushed. And it definitely left her wanting more, like eagerly anticipating the next book.
Oh, so a bit of a cliffhanger situation.
Yeah, and she felt like the last couple of chapters were more about setting up the next installment than providing a sense of closure.
I mean, that can be frustrating, but it's also a really effective way to keep readers hooked on the series.
Right, and Lexi's reaction definitely suggests that Yarros succeeded in creating that anticipation.
And Sierra's perspective on the ending kind of reinforces that idea of it being more about continuing the story, because she mentioned a lot of major plot points being addressed and some theories getting confirmed or debunked, and then, importantly, a lot of new questions arising.
Right, so definitely not just wrapping everything up in a neat little bow.
Yeah, it seems like Onyx Storm really pushes the overarching narrative forward, even if it doesn't tie everything up neatly.
Which I think is really exciting, because it means there's still so much more to come. So yeah, be prepared to walk away from this book with some lingering questions and a craving for the next one.
I think that's a good thing, though. It keeps the excitement going.
Totally. Now, one last thing I think is helpful for readers is understanding the genre and the kind of themes that they might encounter.
Yeah, that can really help set expectations.
And one source categorized Onyx Storm as fantasy romance. And they listed a bunch of different tropes that are relevant, like armed forces, chosen family, forbidden love, trauma, like all these really juicy things.
Ooh, yeah, that gives you a good sense of the emotional landscape of the book.
Right, and for readers who love that combination of fantasy and romance, seeing those tropes can be really helpful in deciding if it's the right book for them.
Totally. It's like a quick snapshot of what you're going to get thematically.
So when we pull all of this together, what's the overall feeling from these early reactions?
Well, I think despite a few minor criticisms, like the feeling of being overwhelmed with information or the rushed ending, it seems like the overall impression is really positive.
Yeah, Sierra actually said Onyx Storm is her favorite so far, which is a big statement considering how much everyone loved Fourth Wing.
Right, and she kept mentioning the writing and the immersive quality.
Yeah, and even Lexi, who had that initial feeling of being overwhelmed, she ultimately gave it a glowing 5-star review.
Wow, yeah, and the fact that both reviewers are so excited for the next book really speaks volumes.
Totally, it shows that Yarros is doing something right.
Definitely.
So it seems like Onyx Storm is shaping up to be a book that's really rich in world building, has strong character development, and a plot that's going to keep you on the edge of your seat.
And don't forget that cliffhanger ending.
Oh yeah, be prepared for that.
Yeah.
But what I'm curious about is what aspects of these reactions really stood out to you?
Yeah, what are you most excited about?
Are you more drawn to the promise of this deeper, more detailed world? Or are you more intrigued by the growth of the characters and their relationships?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about what hooks different readers.
And if you've already read Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, I think these insights should give you a really good idea of what to expect going into Onyx Storm.
Totally. And if you're new to the Empyrean series, just be prepared for a complex and rewarding world and a cast of characters whose stories are constantly evolving.
For sure. And if you're loving these deep dives into the world of books, please take a moment to subscribe and leave a review for the Book Nook podcast.
Yeah, it really helps us out and lets us know what you're enjoying.
And we love hearing your thoughts too. So feel free to leave a comment and tell us what you're most excited about for Onyx Storm.
Yeah, we love getting those insights from our listeners.
Thank you so much for listening to the Book Nook podcast, and you can find a link to get your own copy of Onyx Storm in the description below.
Happy reading, everyone!
See you next time.